bright and shiny in my mind. You got me loving, hating, crazy, indecision in my mind.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast, where the focus is on deer hunting, tips, tricks, tactics, and stories from across the Midwest. And now, here is your host, Aaron Blicey.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blicey, and this is episode number 31. And on today's episode, we've got a really cool guest, and he's from Missouri. His name's Chuck Weldon of the Whitetail Fix. And I don't know about you, man, but I'm excited to get him on the phone. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I'm excited to hear him speak and just have some conversation with him. I know he's a heck of a hunter, and he passes some giant deer that most people probably shake their head at, and say must be nice. But he's just always, knowing who he is from the Fix, from Whitetail Fix. Just one of those people who seems to have his crap together. He's in the right mindset all the time, and he just knows that you can't kill 180s if you shoot them when they're 170, and it's just a matter of what you identify as your target and, managing for that. And I've always respected that about Chuck and other hunters like him, so I'm anxious to talk to him.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a couple things I want to get into, and that's one of the big ones is, the ability for him to pass the deer that he does pass, and it's crazy. I mean, we see it on TV, and I've known Chuck, he's been one of my good friends for the last couple of years, and I talk to him every once in a while and through the season, just say, hey, what's going on? What are you killing? What are you seeing? Stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. And actually, for everybody that doesn't know, he's gonna be a familiar voice if you've heard the podcast before. He's actually the VO guy at the beginning of the podcast. So the day I called him and asked him, hey, you want to do some VO stuff? And he's like, heck yeah, I'll do that for sure. He's like, I don't know if I have the voice for it, but he's exactly who I wanted to do it. And the reason why is because he's a radio host in Kansas City as well. So he's been doing radio for a lot of years too. So he's familiar with everything, and he's got a pretty good voice that I wanted to be able to do that. And he said, good, let's do it. So before we get him on here, I haven't really talked to you in the last couple of days, and with the new year and everything, and to everybody, haven't said it before, but Happy New Year. We are in 2019, and Happy New Year to you as well, Justin. But what's been going on the last couple of days and everything? You been hunting and filming? What have you been up to?
Well, Happy New Year to you as well, and to Alyssa and Peyton. But I actually have not been hunting in quite a while. I did buy my late season muzzleloader tag yesterday, and I had plans to go scout out some public land like I've been talking about and try to find those food sources. I was kind of banking on between New Year's Eve yesterday. Well, we're recording on the 1st, but so yesterday being New Year's Eve and today being New Year's Day, I was kind of counting on some low pressure out in the public land, and the weather was right. We got a little bit of snow, some freezing rain. It got real nasty, and today I think it was like a high of 10 degrees. But I don't know. Like we talked about that last podcast, you kind of, you're approaching that wall, and like all of a sudden you fall asleep on the couch at 6 o'clock, and you're like, what happened? And that was me on New Year's Eve yesterday. I fell asleep around 9:30 and woke up this morning and felt like I got hit by a train. So if I sound like I'm underwater, it's because I feel like I am, and I came down with a bit of a cold today out of nowhere, so I actually did not get to hunt today, which is unfortunate. But we talked, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, maybe a week ago, the last podcast, I think, about those late season tactics and talking about how sometimes a warm-up in the weather can be just as effective as that cold snap. So I'm banking on that. I'm going to try to nurse myself back to health here and try to hunt it out the rest of the week. And I actually decided not to go to ATA, just to buy myself a couple more days, because our season ends on the 10th, and that's the end of Iowa season. So just buy myself as much time as I can to hunt. My wife also has a tag for this late season, so I don't know, just going to give it hell and hope I feel better here in a couple of days to be able to spend the time out there I need to try to find a buck on public land after 3 seasons.
Well, I've been fighting the good fight, I guess you could say. I've been out hunting a couple times and been striking out. Actually today, as we're recording this, is the last day of Michigan's deer season. But the last week or so, I've been trying to pick my battles and trying to get out when I can, and try to get a doe. I've got a couple doe tags, and I wanted to, get some meat in the freezer and everything. And I know I'm going to be going to Ohio this week. I'm leaving Friday for Ohio for the last hurrah, basically. And that I'm not going to go to ATA as well because I've got an Ohio, buck tag and a doe tag in my pocket that I want to fill those tags. But in Michigan here, we talked about it earlier on the other podcast, is that we got a doe issue up to the family farm, and I wanted to get up there and kill a doe and everything. And so I had a plan to go out on, it would have been Sunday morning, Saturday morning. So I'd be going out Saturday morning. The wind was out of the north, and I was going to go out in the morning. So to get to into the property, you have to go through the field to get in. So it's not very ideal for a morning sit. So my plan was to just pull inside of the trail right off the road, and I was just going to kind of wait for it to get daylight. And the wind, I was south of the property, so the wind would be hitting me right in the face. And my plan was just to basically still hunt the whole field. And our field is pretty hilly, and I figured I could probably get pretty close to a doe and be able to take her. So, I got up there, and I had one of the other guys, Pat Cook. He came with me, and we were gonna try to double up. And so we get there in the morning and get everything situated, and it starts getting daylight, and we're like, well, let's head out, and start easing our way up these hills. So as we get up the first hill, we see some does. They're a ways away. So we get down in this, we kind of backtrack, and we get down in this valley, and we knew once we get down in the valley, we can start working our way right to them. But we figured that we would probably still be a good clip away from when we start getting exposed. We were hoping they were going to move a little bit down into the hole where they were at. And as we start getting exposed, we don't see the deer anymore. So we're like, what the heck? So we keep going, and they actually did. They moved down in that hole, so it actually worked out a lot better. We were able to get to about 165 yards away, and there was 4 of them. Made sure they weren't button bucks, and none of them were button bucks, and made sure they were good size and older. We're trying to go after the older does, and found 2 of them, and we're sitting there, and we were going to do a 1, 2, 3 kind of shoot deal. And we've done it before, and it's kind of tricky. It can be tricky, but it's worked out every time we've done it before. And so we finally get all the deer to clear and broadside and everything and ready to go. And we do the 1, 2, 3 shoot, and nobody shoots. So, what I was the one counting, and I was trying to start pulling the trigger, and I was hoping it was going to go off at 3, and it didn't. And I think he was doing the same thing. So it was kind of one of those, like, okay, what do we do? And then like a minute and a half, not a minute, I'm sorry, like a second and a half go by, and he just, he shoots. And then the deer are starting to run and everything. And the deer that I was aiming at starts running right at us, and she kind of starts slowing down. And I get on her, and she kind of gets to a spot where I can shoot, and I pull the trigger and click. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I know I loaded the gun. And then they run into the woods. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So I've got a bolt action Savage 270. And I open the bolt, and the shell comes flying out. And I'm like, what the hell? And I grab it, and I look at it, and no dimple, no nothing in the shell. Nothing. It just didn't go off. And I said, did you hear it click? He goes, yeah, I heard it click. And I'm like, what the hell, So I'm like beside myself because I've had a difficult year, with the whole gym thing, and then and then going down to Ohio and having to pass up the biggest deer I would have, been able to take. And now this, and it's like I'm just trying to get meat for the freezer. So we go up and check out, where he shot his deer, no blood, no nothing. And he's like, well, I don't know if exactly, I didn't really feel confident in it. And I'm like, well, okay, so let's track it anyway. So there was snow on the ground, and we spent a good amount of time, trying to find blood, didn't find any blood. Finally come to the conclusion that it was a clean miss. And we kind of grid searched the hills to this hilly section of the property we call the Oaks, and so we didn't find anything, and so we chalked it up as a clean miss. So him and I weren't going to be able to go hunting until it had been Sunday night, and so we went back out to that property Sunday night, and it was him and me and his dad. We were going to 3 different spots. And I was actually going to my cousin's blind, and he's like, yeah, there's been a lot of does down in there, and he's actually hunting on the edge of like a cedar swamp on a big oak ridge. And so I start, walking in, and the wind was kind of iffy, and I knew I had to do a different loop to get into the blind to make sure where the deer, I knew where the deer were bedding. I just needed to do different loops so they wouldn't smell me. I get in the blind, and I think I texted you or something, or I sent you a picture of like, here we go, let's try this again kind of thing. And
yep.
And I'm serious. Like, I was sitting there. It wasn't 5 minutes later, and I picked my binos up, and I'm just kind of glassing the timber. And as I'm scanning the timber, deer just started to appear. They were down in front of me. I think when I got in the blind, they had no idea. And they're at like 100 yards. I'm like, holy cow! And there was like 4 of them. So now I'm like, got to pick out the biggest one and the oldest one, and make sure the other ones, make sure it's not a button buck and everything, because their fur's starting to get longer now, and it's late season, so they all kind of look big. So I'm looking, and I found one button buck, and then I pick out the alpha. I mean, she's a big doe, and she starts working her way to it would have been to the east, and they were going to start hitting my wind. And she stopped right in the shooting lane and put the crosshairs on her and let her eat. And this shell did go off, thank God.
Worked.
And yeah, that one did work. And she ran off probably 30 yards, and that was the end of it, man. So I got my meat in the freezer.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yep. So yeah, for sure. It only took me the whole hunting season to get something on the ground. I mean, I did have an opportunity earlier, but
it's the way it goes
like
sometimes.
I've said before. Yeah. It's been a long journey, but I got meat in the freezer now, so I'm leaving Friday for Ohio, and I got a doe tag and a buck tag, so we will see what happens with the muzzleloader down there.
Nice. Well, I hope your decision to pass, well, I guess it wasn't your decision. It was in the moment, but I hope you don't see that deer again. I hope you see something that makes passing him worth it.
I'm really hoping so too. I really hope he's just the deer I don't see. I mean, it'd be nice to see him because he's a very beautiful deer. I mean, I just don't want to have to see him and make that. I mean, the call's already made. I can't shoot him,
right.
But I just don't want to have to go through that again.
Yeah, that's the
But
worst.
in the story aspect, it'll make for a great story because that just does another encounter that we can build in for next year for if somebody does have the opportunity to take him. Basically,
yeah,
we will see. What's your plans going forward here? Then are you gonna make it out to try to fill that last tag?
Yeah, definitely am. I'm hoping I'm going to give it a shot tomorrow if I'm feeling better, but it's a mental battle, I think, to begin with, because the piece I want to go to is like an hour and a half one way. So it's quite an investment in the day to go down there to hunt and then have to drive back, after you've been out there in the cold, and which it is. It is what it is. It's that time to do it, and there's just part of me that says, there's not going to be a deer left on public ground right now, but the other part of me says, you got to go look. If you don't look,
Right.
you definitely won't know. So
Right.
I think if I can go find some
Yep.
food, I have a fighting chance. But I'm not going to just go shoot any buck to say I tagged out this year. I'm still going to hold myself to that standard. I want at least a 4-year-old out there. Is what I'm holding out for. Just like I did during the archery season. But I don't know. I don't know if that's realistic or not right now. It's still a learning experience for me. Hunting Iowa and let alone being on public ground. So I really don't know what to expect for this late season anyway.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is you're going to get out there and try it, and you're going to learn more too. You're going to learn. Maybe there isn't deer on this piece late season, so for the next couple years or however long you hunt it, or you might learn something else too, that it could be a deer. It's where they yard up. You never know.
Yeah, that's true. You don't. But I do know that there were 2 bean fields that were, 3 to 4 acres apiece that in the middle of November still hadn't gotten picked yet. So I'm banking on those still being unpicked. They may be picked over by the deer, but they were not harvested as of the middle of November. So that's what I'm going back to look at.
Well, I give you luck, man. Hopefully everything works out for you and you're able to fill that last tag.
Yeah, thank you, and good luck to you as well in Ohio. I think we're both kind of throwing the Hail Mary right now. We got 1 tag left apiece, and only 7 or 8 days left to get out there. So, got to try.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have some good content to talk about for the podcast just on our own.
Yeah.
So
I hope so. Speaking of that, there's a lot of awesome information in this one. So I say we get right into it and just run it. Let's let everybody hear what Chuck has to say.
Yeah, I'm excited to get him on, so let's do that. All right, here we are. It is episode 31, and today we have a pretty special guest on. His name is Chuck Weldon, and for a lot of people that don't know him, he actually is the VO guy for the Fall Podcast. So, Chuck Weldon, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, buddy. How are you guys?
We're doing good.
Doing good.
Yeah, you definitely know you're scraping the bottom of the barrel when you got to go out and talk to the VO guy on your hunting podcast, right?
I don't look at it that way. I look at it as, you and I've been pretty good buddies for the last 5 or 6 years, and you're not only a really good deer hunter, but you're a good friend, a great farmer, and just all around good to talk to.
I appreciate that. Likewise.
Well, before we get too far into this, Chuck, do you want to kind of give a quick background on, what you do with the Whitetail Fix, what is the Whitetail Fix, and, what you do on a day-to-day and where you're from?
Sure. Well, I'm from north central Missouri. Gallatin, Missouri is what I call home. And I guess in full disclosure, I'll be 42 here next month and been a part of the Whitetail Fix since its inception, which gosh, I think we're filming season 7 now, which feels like it's kind of like a marriage. Feels like season 17 now. But I think we're filming season 7, and we're down a few guys from what we first started. But Whitetail Fix was all created after we were blessed to do a show with Dury Outdoors called Dream Season Working Man. And when that show came to an end, there was only a couple of us from the show that was picked up to be a part of the Drury staff, which, back then, and I would say still is now, is the holy grail of outdoor pro staff. And when we didn't make it, Mark Drury, he told us at our last group hunt, he said, for those of you that don't make it, said you're all good enough to do your own thing. And it wasn't long after that, one of the guys started calling and asking for footage, and kind of knew that something was up a little bit, and they put together a sizzle reel, and the rest is history. The Whitetail Fix was born. So obviously had a chance to work with you, Aaron, at the Roost for one season, and learned so much from you guys up there that we've put forth into the show ever since. And We're still going. It's a tough road, but we're still trucking along.
Yep. So you guys are on the Sportsman's Channel still, correct?
Yep. Gosh, and forgive me. I would say that we're not airing now because we're after the first of the year, but I think our prime airing is on Sunday evenings. I don't even know the exact times. You know, everything they do. We're out here in the good part of the world in Central Standard Time, and then everything they do for television is Eastern. So I'm leery to even say what our air times are, and they may change for next year. But we air third and fourth quarter, so I would assume that we're wrapped up now. So.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
But-
Eastern Time, it runs basically the whole U.S., so, I mean, you guys are just going to have to suck it up.
Well, I tell people all the time that we've got it better because we don't have to go to bed as early as you, and we don't have to get up as early as you guys do. But anyway, so and
That's
on a
right.
daily basis, back to your question, I'm a full-time farmer. I run. My dad has retired. He's still active in the farm, but I took over the farm from him here a couple of years ago. We farmed about 3,500 acres of corn and soybeans, and then I'm a contract pork producer for a large Smithfield Foods, one of the largest pork producer in the world. But we've got we got capacity for 6,800 head of pigs right now, and I'm actually building a 9,600 head nursery as we speak. So so I play in the pig poop and the dirt when I'm not out chasing deer. So
Yeah. Well, today I wanted to kind of get you on and do a couple things here, and I wanted to talk about some topics that I really think that you're one of the best at, and that is one. We'll start with this. It is the ability to age deer on the hoof and pass deer up. And because I see some of the footage and you send me pictures and, you know, you and I talk through the fall and everything and you sending me stuff like you're passing these deer up and I'm like, holy crap, like how are you passing these deer up? Like, you know, a deer that to your standards, because, you know, we'll get into a little more here in a bit. I'll ask you, you know, what you're looking for your standards as far as, you know, deer you're trying to get on. And, because the deer you're passing up, I mean, I'd be much obliged to get an opportunity, I'll tell you. So, you know, if you could start by, you know, just telling us, you know, what are your standards and what are you looking for to get on every year when you go into a season?
well, there's a running joke within the whitetail fix and even with a lot of my friends that every deer on my farm is 2.5 years old. And I'll be honest, I don't know that you know that I am as good as what you say at aging deer. I just you know Mark Drury and Lee Lukoski and Don Kiske. I mean, these guys that we've all watched for years, and that's just naming a few. There's so many more great ones out there that you know I've learned so much from watching all these guys on TV, and it's so hard because you know the size of the deer and stuff vary from state to state, and I don't know. I've just, you know, I've learned to watch deer through trail camera pictures and whatnot. And quite frankly, you know, I may say it's a 3-year-old. In reality, it may be 4. But if it's not, you know, if it's not what I'm after, then obviously I'm not going to draw my bow. But I was very fortunate that my first bow kill, and it was gross score, you know, around 155, I believe, 152, 155. And I just kind of set a standard. And I'm an animal lover. I've always, you know, just been an animal lover. And I've never been one to go out and just shoot a buck for the sake of shooting a buck. If I want meat, then I'll harvest a doe. And I take great pride in what I got hanging on my wall. I mean, I've almost every deer on my wall is 150 plus. And I just kind of set my standards at that. And I was hunting the biggest deer in my life this year, probably a 200 plus inch deer. Somebody else ended up killing it, and I passed on the same farm, probably a mid 150s buck. And then I was hunting just a couple nights ago. I'm guessing upper 40s, low 50s, 10 point come out, and it was. You know, it just wasn't. I looked at it and I said, "There's 3. That there's 3. That's there's 3." I watched the footage back. One of the guys, Steve Philly, he said, Chuck, that deer's 4, that deer's 4, that deer's 4. You're crazy. But I just look at it as, hopefully by giving them a pass to next year. The old saying is, you can't kill a big one if you kill a small one, or I can't remember the exact saying, but, you got to let them grow. And that's just my philosophy. It takes a lot of willpower. When, the other night I was out there freezing my tail off, and I've chased this big deer all season, really just worn out and run down and whatnot. And it's been real easy at 15 yards on the ground to put an end to my season. But it's just, you can't kill them big if you don't let them, let the little ones go. So
Now, you were saying, you passed up a mid-150s buck this year. Now, when you're sitting there, now you were after a, giant, what you think is, 200-inch deer this year. Were you in a spot at that moment where you really thought that, were you in that big deer's bedroom where you didn't really want to screw everything up by killing this 150? Or was it something when you first saw that 150 that you were like, it just didn't get you going? Or, what was that?
It got me going. In fact, on that particular hunt, this farm, and to answer your question first, the big deer did not live on my farm. And if you want me to get into that, I can. I mean, last year when I hunted that deer, I had 3 pictures of that deer August the 3rd. We were feeding Big and J, which it's legal here in Missouri. We were feeding Big and J, and I got 3 pictures of that deer August the 3rd. 1 possible picture December the 1st, and then 3 back-to-back encounters in mid to late December. I can't remember the exact days. Fast forward to 2018. I believe it was August the 13th. I got a half a dozen pictures of him on a feed pile. Didn't get another picture of him until the 7th of November. But he's a world-class whitetail. And we do grow, some decent deer here in North Missouri. We don't grow them like they do in southern Iowa. But, this particular deer was a rarity, definitely a rarity in Missouri, even, a rarity in southern Iowa. So to answer your question, no, I didn't feel like I was in his bedroom. I just felt like I was playing the Powerball, and I was just hoping that all my numbers were going to hit one night when I was in the tree. And when this deer came out, I was actually walking in that night, and I saw this deer on the side of a hill. It's a terribly hard farm to access. It's pretty much all CRP until you get to the other side of the farm where it butts up against some timber on the neighbor. And I was walking in, and I actually saw this buck with another buck and a doe, and I had the wind right, and I was able to make a big sweep around. I have no idea how I got up in the tree. I actually thought at first it was him, so I was, extremely excited. When the smaller buck came out about 30 minutes after I got up in the tree, when he stepped out, I knew it wasn't him. But trust me, I mean, look, I'm a self-filmer, looking through the viewfinder, looking through the binoculars. The only thing that saved that deer's life was his G2s were about 3 inches shorter than his G3s, which it seems to be a common thing that we have right here in our area is shorter G2s. And we've always, the local guys around here, we've always kind of made the agreement that, if we have a deer like that come out, we'll let him go one more year to see if those 3s will surpass the 2s and make him a much larger deer. But I reached over and grabbed my bow, and this was a leased piece of property. I leased some property with another guy from the Whitetail Fix, Mike Marsteller, and we kind of have a gentleman's agreement that we only shoot 1 buck off each track. And this particular track, it was him and then the big deer, and I would have broken the rule and shot them both, but like I said, I felt like I was playing the Powerball, and this deer was so unpredictable. I knew he was within a quarter to half mile. He was killed 3/4 of a mile west of where I'd been hunting him. I knew he was close, and it was just, one of those deals. This was mid-October. The weather was right. The food source was there. And again, I didn't want to go in and, be dragging this 155-inch deer out and him been staged up on the edge on that one particular day coming in to get a bite to eat or an early doe. We joke all the time here that the rut starts about September and ends the 1st of March because we've got so many does. So just
Right.
one of them, didn't want to screw it up. And then I'm always thinking, and the guys beat me up pretty hard about it because I'm always thinking the next year, man,
Yep.
what would that deer be like next year? And judging by what we had on trail cameras on that farm, there was some decent prospects, but as far as the top hit lister, that particular deer was going to be the top hit lister for next year.
I got you. And I guess what poses this question is that I hunt in Michigan, a highly pressured area, which I also do hunt out of state as well. And I don't know if it's right or wrong. My standards are bigger in out of state. I want to kill a 4-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have as many big deer on the wall as you do. But in Michigan, I'm trying to kill a 3-year-old, and that's regardless of antler size. If I think the deer's 3 and that deer excites me, then that's what I'm going to go for. But my big thing is to you, like I'm trying to pick a lot of people's brains about this. And do you, a lot of people say, well, if I don't kill it, then the neighbor's going to kill it. Now, does that ever cross your mind? And is that something that you factor in if it does?
Oh yeah, yeah, and what I call my primary farm, which is just behind my house, the farm that I grew up and cut my teeth on. The neighboring landowner had sold off a bunch of that property to an old order or horse and buggy Mennonite community. And they've got a ton of kids and they love to hunt. Excuse me. And I've worked with them or I shouldn't say worked with them, but I've talked with them and tried to educate them and whatnot. On growing older deer, and it thankfully has worked. It has taken a toll on our numbers, but I've had 2 of my target bucks that have fallen, to those neighbors. So yeah, if I'm hunting a big deer behind my house, then my philosophy over the years has changed because the pressure has increased. That okay, do I want to kill him at 4 years of age at 160 inches, or do I want to take the gamble that I can kill him at 5 and 170? And I can, like I said, I've only lost 2 that I know of. Both of them been giants. But and that's, let me rewind one thing. When I talked about TV and learning so much from TV, I do think that that's one thing that the TV has maybe in one respect has helped the industry or the hunting or educating hunters. And I also think it's hurt because so many people get into he's 160 inches at 4, he's automatically going to be 170 at 5. Not every 5 and 6 year old deer is going to be a Boone and Crockett deer. One of my target deer that I lost to the neighbors was I think he was 6 years old, and I don't think he gained an inch in score from 4 to 6. I mean, he just was what he was. He was just older. But yeah, it definitely. And where I was hunting this 200-inch deer, or we called him Splits. I won't say how big he was. I never actually laid my hands on him, but he was a world-class whitetail. It was a more highly pressured area. So I knew that the odds were stacked against me from the get-go. But he did fall a victim to a archery tackle, which was a little bit of sense of relief because our gun season, happens right during the rut here in Missouri. So the lucky hunter, I'm proud to say, shot him with a bow. So that was a little sense of relief or closure that it wasn't a 500-yard shot on a whim.
Yeah. And I guess that's just something that, I used to be that guy that I was like, well, I'm gonna shoot that deer because the neighbor's gonna shoot him. I used to be that a couple years ago, and I needed to get away from that because, if I kill that deer is 100% dead, and it's mine. You know what I mean? So I was trying to figure out how to combat that, and now I would say the last 3 or 4 years, I've really got myself out of that and really just stuck to my guns. Like said, hey, it needs to be 3 years old. Like it has to be. Like you just have to make that jump, and hopefully, I'll be able to make the jump to a 4-year-old. It hasn't went there yet because I just don't have a ton of 4-year-olds. I only had one 4-year-old on my farm this year. I hunted him hard. I shot him and didn't recover him, and he lived and then ended up getting hit by a car a couple weeks ago, and that's just the nature of the beast. I had my opportunity at him. But that's the first 4-year-old I've ever been able to hunt here in Michigan on the farms that I've hunted. So, I started with the 2.5-year-olds, and then I went to 3.5. So now I'm there. And our 3.5s, we can get some big 3.5s, but our top 10% of our bucks are 3.5 from 115 to 130 to 135. That's the range I'm in right now.
Right. Well, and it's risk versus reward. Most of the guys on Whitetail Fix, and we don't even have to talk about just the guys on the TV show. Most of my friends, yourself included, and people listening to this, if they saw the videos and they saw the pictures of the deer that I was passing, they would say, "You're absolutely nuts." And to be honest, the big TV guys that have the thousands of continuous acres, my primary farm is about 200 continuous acres. That's the biggest farm that I hunt.
Yep.
Everything else is 40s and 80s and things like that. So a lot of those farms, I do have great relationships with my neighbors, which definitely helps. A lot of the farms I don't have. I mean, I have relationships with them, but they don't share the same philosophy I do. So it makes it's risk versus reward. If you shoot it, then you have to live with the decision that, hey, I'm proud of it, I'm happy with it.
Yep.
If you don't shoot it and the neighbor does, you just gotta stiff up your lip and say, well, I tried. And it, like I said, it's bit me in the butt more than once. But I've also capitalized on it. A deer that we hunted for several years, we originally called the Bowers buck. Jason Bowers was on the show and shot at it with a muzzleloader and nicked his belly. And then Matt Bullens, I think, grew on him the next year and got busted in the tree. And 2 years after that, I finally killed him. I mean, he was a legend on the farm, and it was such gratification to know that we finally closed the book. But gosh, it was so rewarding every spring or early summer when we'd go out and start filling feeders and putting cameras up. When he showed up, it was like, yeah, he's still here. And then in the same respect, the summer after I killed him, it was a little bit of a letdown too, knowing that, gosh, we don't have to worry about getting pictures of that big guy anymore. So, like I said, it's risk versus reward, and where you hunt, and I see people on social media that they bash Missouri's gun season, and they bash this law and they bash that law, and my response to that is, the gun season in Missouri has been where it is for as long as I can remember. And I deal with the same thing that all my neighbors deal with. I just go and talk to those neighbors, and with this Mennonite community. I mean, I've started taking them trail cam pictures and printing them off and saying, here, I truly believe that this deer is 4, and he has potential to be a mega giant next year. Or, this is just a big basket rack 4-year-old. If you see this one, feel free to, and I say feel free. We can't live with the mentality that we can tie him to a tree, but if you have an opportunity at this deer, this would be a good one to shoot. But here's a 3-year-old 6x6 or 12 point. Gosh, yeah, he's nice, but man, if we let him go, imagine what he'll be in 2 years. And luckily for me, it's worked. And it's to me, it's just as much about the relationship you have with your neighbors, and I don't want to use the word educate. But if you can start that dialogue with them, and then hopefully over time, subtly sneak a little education in, your conversation, where they start thinking and start looking at trail cam pictures and sharing pictures of deer that you've harvested, that, hey, look at this. Oh man, that's a great buck. Well, yeah, he's a great buck because I passed him 2 years in a row. It's just, I've just been lucky. I mean, I'm a hell of a lot more lucky than I am good. Let's put it that way.
Well, and that was what I was looking for, basically, because I'm kind of in the same boat you are in a way. My family farm is 215 acres, but I share it with 11 guys.
Mm-hmm.
So up there it can be tough sledding, but you can kill a respectable deer for the area. But my other farm, which I call the main farm, it's an 80, and then across the road it's a 40, so it's a 120. But it's on the 80, it's only got 1 acre of timber with a wooded fence line that I can hunt, and then it's all ag. And then on the 40, there's like 3 to 5 acres of timber, and that's it. But I mean, it is surrounded like by ag and little spots of woods. And I'm starting to find out too that a lot of my neighbors, you brought up the education part. A lot of my neighbors, they're not very educated, and I'm not sitting here and gonna say like I know it all, or I this is what you should be doing and everything. I don't want to be that guy. I want hunting to be fun for everybody.
Sure.
But hunting, like and Justin knows, it is my life. It is my job, and it is, other than my family, it is the next thing on the list. Because I think about it every day the year. I'm doing something hunting every single day, and that the main farm, there's a lot of gun pressure once gun season comes on November 15th. But bow season around there isn't a lot. So you've basically got October 1st till the 15th to get it done with a bow. And then it gets pretty sparse of what you're going to try to see. But to combat that, like, I've really tried to hone in on my inventory early in the summer and glassing and everything, and really getting to know the deer that I want to pursue that year. Because if I know them, and I'm going to say intimately, I know how many points they are, they have weird tines or notch in the ear or whatever, and I do like to name them. A lot of people don't. I just think it's much easier than saying, "Oh yeah, Chuck, I'm going after that buck that's got like the kick up beams and the right. like the small brow and the little brow." No, not the 10, the 8. Yeah. It's so much easier just to, so that's kind of what I lean my hat on, is because I want to know what those deer look like when they step out, and it could be a split second decision. I'm like, okay, that's Jim Abbott, I'm gonna shoot him. That's so and so. He was on the list. I'm going after it. And then I got the no hit list. So
sure.
But and sometimes you're gonna get that instance where you're gonna have a new guy show up, and it's like, and then you got to make a decision. So it was just something.
And you've got the ag fields, and it's no big secret. Food is key, and I absolutely love hunting timber. So to say I had 1 acre of timber to hunt on would be, I'd pull my hair out. But a lot of these lease farms that I've picked up are big CRP fields. I've never hunted Kansas, but from what I've seen on TV, they would look a lot like Kansas. They're big CRP farms with draws running up and down them, and strategically placing food plots on those farms and giving those deer a reason to travel up those draws or bed in those draws to go out into that, that CRP field to that food plot is something that I'm doing that maybe a lot of my neighbors aren't doing. And then just hunting smart. I mean, I was sitting in the stand just a few yards off of the neighbor's fence row on opening day of gun season, hunting what I called the bedroom. And they go in 15 minutes after daylight on some side-by-sides and drive halfway down the pasture right to the edge of the timber, and then go cracking in through the frost-covered ground. Just hunting smart and trying to out-hunt your neighbor will make you probably more successful most times than your neighbor. But at the same time, I'm a 100% archery guy too, so I'm a little bit handcuffed through mid-November here in Missouri. So every time a gunshot goes off, you cringe because you just don't know. And like I said before, if I want, and I don't discriminate to anybody that shoots at any buck that is happy with that buck, whether that's a forkhorn, a spike, whatever it may be. I don't discriminate, but my philosophy is it doesn't matter how long you marinate those horns, you still can't eat them. So if I want meat for the freezer, Lord knows we have plenty of does, and there's plenty of opportunity to not only fill my freezer but better that herd out there. if I'm looking for meat. So,
Yep.
you know,
I'm
and
right
that's
there
not,
with you.
and that's not everybody's philosophy in hunting, and that's fine. You know, that's their God-given right as, you know, an American hunter to be able to shoot whatever makes them happy, as long as, you know, it's legal here in Missouri. Missouri is getting, I'm going to use the word radical, with some CWD stuff. I'm fortunate enough, I'm still in a county that's not in a CWD zone. I can still supplemental feed. I can still put out mineral. And we still have a 4-point rule in Missouri. They have to have, or in this county anyway, they still have to have 4 points on one side, to where these CWD counties have gone to no mineral, no feed, and no point restriction. And it's just going to take, and I don't want to get off track, but it's going to happen in my county, and it's going to be a sad day.
Yep. And I'm right there with you. My
Katie, bar
county
the
here in
door.
Michigan. What's that?
I said it's going to be Katie bar the door. I mean, people are just going to
Yeah.
shoot what
Yep.
you know, shoot what they can shoot, and I truly believe, and this is a topic that we could fill up 5 episodes of your podcast with, on supplemental feeding. First of all, it's the number one way to get pictures, but I truly believe the supplemental feeding is great for deer herding. And I've had EHD outbreaks here in Missouri where, you know, I've been hit, but not been hit as hard as other places. And I truly believe it, just like a human, the healthier the human, you know, the better you're going to fight off influenza or that common cold or whatever. And I truly believe the deer herd's the same way. And there may be people out there that, you know, are spitting beer out their nose right now when they're listening to this, thinking this guy's nuts. But like I said, that's a story for another, you know, a topic for another time. So
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the CWD stuff and the point restrictions, because that's a big thing that we're battling right now in Michigan. And the county that I'm in, we haven't found any confirmed cases yet in my county, but I'm surrounded by all the counties that have been found. So I'm in the zone. So there's no supplemental feeding, there's no baiting, no nothing. And there used to be some APRs in Michigan, and I'm pretty sure that they've taken some of those away. And that's a big thing right now, is do you like them or don't you like them? And you know, I was asked that question the other day, and I kind of had to step back and think about it for a second. But you know, my philosophy, I do like them, and this is the reason why. Also, is because ever since I was little, you know, they have this youth hunt in Michigan. My dad never let me hunt the youth hunt because he didn't think that was the way to get me into hunting.
right.
And the other thing is and on our family farm, the farm that I grew up on, the internal rule in camp has always been 4 points on one side or 8 or bigger. That's my whole life. I've never been able to kill, you know, I have, like our first buck that, you know, on the property, your first buck can be whatever you want, but I ended up killing a 6 point that had 4 on one side and 2 on the other. So I've never really killed a buck that didn't have 4 on one side. So that's always been instilled in me, that like when you see a 6 point or a 4 corn or a spike come out, I never really was like, oh, I'm going to kill that deer. You know, it's been instilled in me as a little tiker that, you know, and I'm not saying that's right, but I can tell you when my kid comes up and if she takes to hunting, because, you know, I really still don't believe in the youth hunt as well. I think it's good for kids, but I just don't think me taking her out in the middle of September when the deer are on a very, you know, predictable pattern, and her killing her biggest deer, possibly her biggest deer ever, and never latching on to hunting again, possibly.
Right.
You know, I think it's fun to get the kids into the woods when it's warm out, you know, and it's like kind of comfortable and everything in a way. But then I just don't think if my dad would have let me hunt the youth hunt, that I'd be even more engulfed in hunting. You know what I mean? I just, you know, and that's just the way I feel, and that's the way I was brought up. So that's where I'm at with that. But
Yeah, I mean, I remember very well the first deer that I shot. You know, it definitely wasn't a giant. It was a open sight 30-30, homemade wooden tree stand, and a 4 corn. And my dad was gone that night, but man, I ran to the house. remember getting a John Deere 316 lawnmower and a little pull behind John Deere wagon and went down and recovered the deer myself. And to me that was a Boone and Crockett, and I'm thankful that was my first deer, because if I'd have went out and shot the biggest deer on the farm, I'm not real sure that I would have the same passion for whitetails today that I do. So I stand with you, Aaron, on what I'm not against the youth season at all, but I got to say you and I are definitely on the same page.
Yeah, and I don't want to discourage anybody out there that has their kid doing that, or that's just how I was brought up, and that's just what I believe in, and but as far as the APRs, because that's a big thing going on, not even just in Michigan but everywhere. But I believe APRs do work, because I did watch it firsthand on our family farm my whole life, and I that's just what I've had to deal with my whole life, so that's where I'm at with it. And but yeah.
Well, I don't want to get you all off topic either, but I'm going back to Montana on an elk hunt this September. I haven't been in a couple of years, and I was just talking with the outfitter the other day. In the last 4 or 5 years, they put in a brow tine rule out there, and we were talking about it, and he said I can't believe how much better quality elk we have to hunt today because of that one little rule. So It doesn't just apply to the whitetail world, but it just goes back to what we talked about earlier. You can't kill a big one if you kill a small one.
Right.
So.
Yep. Justin, I know you're over there on the other side. What's your take on the APRs?
He lives in Iowa. He doesn't have any take on it. They're all giants.
Exactly.
Well, to be fair, I growing up in New York, that was a different way to learn how to hunt. In my opinion, I didn't grow up in the Midwest, and I didn't have the opportunities to hunt, a good gene pool, so to speak. And it was shotgun only for the longest time, and you can't even hunt deer till you're 16 in New York. So, not to say there was a lot against me, but I had a long time to wait. So I just used that time to learn as much as I could before I put a weapon in my hand. But we don't have any APRs. I take that back. I think in the last 5 years, a couple counties like in Western New York have implemented them, but I never had to decide or play by those rules, I guess, if you want to call it that. But similar to Chuck, my first deer, really beautiful 6-point that I shot, and as I was tracking it, the neighbor shot it. I watched it die by somebody else's gun. So, there's a lesson to be learned there, But the next day I went and shot a 5-point. So, just part of that, that evolution of a hunter that, we've all read about, like just kill one and then kill as many as possible, focus on quality, and then just start refining your expectation, as a manager and a land steward. But, I don't know how else to describe it. I don't.
Something there that Aaron and I have actually been in a couple places, or at least one place before, doing a little seminar talks. And I always open a seminar up as I don't believe hunting is something that I can teach you. You're born with that natural instinct to go hunt. And the only way you're truly going to learn is to get out there and do it yourself. And I've learned a ton advice and tactics and tricks from other people. But until you can figure out how to go out and master that yourself and put it to use, and like you said, you watched your buck die at the hands of somebody else's gun. That was just a learning experience that you build off of, and makes you a better hunter.
Yeah, and it's something you said earlier that kind of hit home for me was in regards to your God-given right to make that investment in the animal, and like only what's involved in that, and when it comes to choosing whether you're passing a 2 or a 3 or a 4-year-old deer, like depending on where you live and what you identify, as a target. One thing I said that, when I shot my buck this year, and this wasn't rehearsed or anything, it just kind of came out of my mouth in the moment, but like, no matter what you're hunting, where you live in the country, big game, small game, whatever, You know, every hunter has a right to define their own trophy. Like, only you know what's invested in that moment, whether it be years of management, hours of, you know, stalking, like however you define it. Like, for me, it was leaving my whole family, selling my house. My wife quit her job, just uprooted and moved to Iowa to take this job, you know, and that deer will forever be one of the most important deer and, you know, one of the most memorable hunts I've ever had and will ever have in my life for that reason. So to be able to quantify your trophy how you decide, I mean, that's 100% you're right. And nobody can take that from you.
And the best way to respond to that is simply amen. I mean, I don't you know, I don't ever judge. You know, if somebody kills a deer, you know, I don't care if it's somebody I know or if I'm driving down the road and they're loaded the back of the truck and I stop to say hi. You know, it's a handshake, a high five, and a congratulations. And that doesn't matter if that's a 110-inch 2-year-old or a 200-inch 6-year-old. Like you said, you know, nobody knows. And I take a much different approach to whitetail hunting than, you know, some of my friends do. And that's fine, you know. You know, we're just blessed that you know, we don't want to, you know, get all the Nugent and Waddell on us here, but I mean, we're just blessed that we live in this country where, you know, we have the right to do this and do it the way we want to do it, as long as we're within the confines of the law. You know, it's you know, whatever you want to get out of it. So
that's right.
Yep, Justin, I mean, you both hit the nail right on the head. I mean, you don't know whose journey got them to that point to kill whatever they wanted to kill, you know. And that was another thing with the APRs going on, too. It's like, you know, it could be, you know, a kid or a adult could be dying of a terminal illness, and this could be their last hunt. You know, this would be their last hunt. And it's like, well, with the APR, if you have a spike come out or if you have whatever, if it doesn't have 4 on one side or 3 on one side, then how do you justify that? And I don't know how you really combat that yet, but I guess to go back, it has shown and proven that it does better the deer herd. But I mean, it's still up for discussion, and I think it'll always be something, you know, a big talking point, and maybe, you know, I don't know. Will everybody agree on it? I never. You know, it's just
it's like being part of a private club.
Right.
Right. Exactly. You know, and to go back to your trophy idea too, or your trophy story, and I talk about them every podcast. But the deer I was hunting this year, Jim Abbott, you look at the deer and antlers wise, yeah, he probably isn't a trophy. He's been deformed on the one side his whole life that I've known of, but I've been chasing this deer for 3 years. And, you know, like I said, like the deer is 4 years old, and he is the unicorn of our area. Like, a lot of people don't know he's 4 years old. Like, I have a neighbor opening morning of rifle season passed him up because he hunts, he's a rifle hunter, but he's educated to a certain point. And that wasn't a trophy to him because he didn't have great antlers. That was but he didn't know he was a mature deer. You know, he just didn't know, he wasn't that far educated, which is fine, you know. But he got passed up by 3 different hunters this year I know of with a rifle, my neighbors, that told me because he didn't have another good side. And when I look at him, I'm like, man, this is the story that got me here to him. I mean, he is what epitomizes a trophy, because you never know as a year and a half old, which a lot of people don't understand, and this is a podcast I want to get into as well, is, you know, a lot of hunters around me and in Michigan, and I'm sure this is everywhere too, but I can only speak to the guys that I talk to here in Michigan, is like, I show them a picture of the deer on my phone. It's like, well, yeah, he's a good one to get out because you don't want him breeding. Well,
I don't believe that.
You never know what happened to that deer.
Right.
Because that, first of all, number one, in my opinion, you can't control genetics in the wild. You just cannot, especially in the area I'm in, because I don't have enough ground. Number two is and when I ask people, I'm like, well, do you know how he got that? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, he was born like that? And I'm like, well, no, it doesn't mean he was born like that. He could have been hit by a car as a 1-year-old. And what a lot of people don't understand when I tell them this story is, like, you know, if he has an injury on his back right side, and let's say he was shot or got hit by a car and he survives, on his hind side, you know, his opposite side antlers are going to be deformed possibly. But if you hit him on the front shoulder on that side, it's usually the same shoulder, if that makes sense. So a lot of people don't understand that, and, you know, and I just want to educate them a little more, you know, if they want to be educated. I don't want to shove it down their face either, because then it's not fun.
And that's the hard part, is they need to be willing to accept the fact that they might be wrong. And if you can't have a intelligent conversation about it and say, well, you know, there's actually stuff out there that suggests that's not true. Like, if they're not willing to actually talk to you with the willingness to learn something else, like, all you're going to do is piss them off.
I've picked up in the last 3 years probably 3 different deer heads that people have shot on my property. And in the back of my mind, I've said, well, this deer's 3 or this deer's 4, just looking at his body laying there. And then we open up his mouth, and they're toothless. You know, now are they that old that they're toothless? You know, I don't believe, as far as aging deer, that any of us are 100%, you know, spot on correct on aging deer. But I've lost my train of thought. But as we say around here, I derailed. But back to the genetic thing too. I've actually, and we're probably getting off base of what you want to talk with. I've actually had very just great conversations with friends of mine that absolutely refuse to shoot a doe because they don't know what the genetic makeup of that doe is. And
right,
you know, it's something that you got to sit there and scratch your head a little bit and say, you know, that makes sense. And, you know, and I don't know. I mean, it depends on which expert and biologist and whatnot that you talk to. But back to the part about the genetics, you know, there's no way, you know, there's no way in the wild that we can say that buck, you know, will never be anything. And then the same thing with that doe. I mean, that's one reason why when I don't like shooting does late season, because I gotta wonder, did that 200-inch deer that I was chasing breed that doe, and 6 years later,
right,
you know, I'm gonna have a chance to chase a deer like his daddy,
right?
And maybe that's putting way too much thought into it, and probably to a lot of people that's what we do. But back to your story about your deer, Aaron, the one thing that we all have, you know, that you and I have an advantage of, and Justin, is, you know, the trail cam pictures, the video, and the ability to put that into a story, and that makes it,
right,
you know, compelling for us to be able to, you know, whether it's just for our self-enjoyment or for airing it on a television show, we're able to tell that story. But there again, back to what we said earlier, though the 3 different hunters passed that deer. You know, I wish that a lot more people did that, because horns weren't big enough, and then all of us would be hunting deer like they have in Iowa, you know.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I even said too, I was like, I'm not gonna. I didn't tell them this, but I'm thinking in the back of my head, I'm not gonna beg you to shoot him, because, you know, they're passing up these deer, but I guess I just want everybody to be able to have an opportunity at a better deer, you know, and then it makes our deer herd better. And to kind of go back to your doe story, Chuck, I have one of my best friends still to this day. Him and I get in arguments about, because he doesn't believe in shooting does, and I do, for the deer herd. And he's like, his philosophy on it is, well, if I kill 3 does, then there is 3 opportunities for that doe to have a buck fawn that I can hunt later. And I'm like, well, yes, but do you understand that, you know, typically if a doe has a buck, and let's say it's a button buck, or, you know, that doe is going to kick that button buck typically off the property, you know, so in some ways that deer is leaving your property as well. But also the big thing for me is you have an overabundance of does. Let's say you have 30 does that call your property home, or even more. Those does are eating the food that the bucks are trying to eat as well, and that in turn, the does will kick bucks off the property because that's their home. And they live in doe family groups. You know what I mean? There's more does than, there could be 8 does in a family group to 1 buck. So my thing is try to get the numbers as close as you can so they can all call it home, if that makes sense.
I was going to say another big factor in that, like not only food, like you're talking about competition when it comes to resources, but think about the competition that increases during the rut. If your ratio is 10 does to 1 buck, every one of those does is going to come into estrus. Right. And if you've got 1 buck chasing 10 does, like that buck is going to be severely stressed and, malnourished. He's probably, I'm not going to say he's going to die 100%, but, just from a competition standpoint, that applies to food, breeding rights, and that food availability translates into the spring when it comes time to nurse those fawns. And it's like, I'm on your side, Aaron. I think it is 100% necessary to shoot does. Like what Chuck said earlier is true. Like you don't know the genetic makeup of that doe because you don't see it in anything like a set of antlers. And the doe is the limiting factor in what you see in the offspring. But by the rule of nature, your youngest deer are the most genetically superior just because of that competition. Like the bucks fight for breeding rights. The same thing like moose, elk, caribou, all mammals do it. And the does, you see them fighting. There's a pecking order and a hierarchy amongst the females. That doesn't dictate their breeding cycles, but you see the respect they have for each other based on their age classes. And that's why if you can target mature does, you're having just as much of an effect on your herd as targeting mature bucks.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you're both right in my opinion. I call this, a dead horse conversation because, we can beat back and forth all we want because I'm actually on both sides of the fence. I'm the same way. I looked out my window tonight and counted 44. Now, albeit, my farm, what I call my primary farm, it really didn't have anything this year that I wanted to shoot. So we've been dumping corn behind the house all winter just to keep the deer to kind of this side of the property. And it's cold here, but there's 44 of them behind the house. Hunting turkeys here is just nearly impossible because we got so many hens, you can't call in a damn tom. That's the same way with the rut. The rut is we'd all been married a long time ago if we didn't have to go out and look for them, right. And then it's the same way here. So I'm on both sides of the fence. I definitely believe that too many mouths at the table is a bad thing. And it goes back to what I said about our rut starting in September and going through March. I've literally sit in the stand and had a doe and a button buck walk by, and the button buck has got 2 to 2.5 inch buttons on top of the head, and the next fawn that walks by looks like it's barely out of spots. That goes to show you right there that rut didn't happen in that breeding didn't happen with those 2 does in that same 7 to 10 day window, 1st of November into October. And I don't know that we can ever. I don't know that we can ever, as hunters, completely get a buck to doe ratio where we want it. Just for the simple fact that, like you said, Justin, one gets pushed out of this herd, it ends back up in your other herd. We do a coyote drive here with about 175 Amish every year, and we'll completely rid a section of coyotes, and then 3 weeks later, it sounds like there's 20 or twice as many back. And so I don't know that we can ever, with manpower or hunting power, we can ever get a buck to doe ratio exactly where we want it. I think that's why the good Lord, Mother Nature, makes us endure nasty things like EHD and stuff like that. It's nature's way of getting things back the way it needs to be. It's never fun.
It's a cleanse.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like I said, I think when it comes to the does, it's a dead horse conversation because I think people are right from both sides, and that's kind of the nasty nature of us as outdoorsmen. I've done radio for 20 some years. There's a song, politics, religion, and her. Well, you might as well throw hunting in on that too, because that's four things that you probably, if your best friend is into women, politics, religion, and hunting, you're probably not going to end up being friends at the end of the conversation. So.
That is true. That needs to be a T-shirt. I'm going to tell you what right now.
New podcast T-shirt.
There you go. We might have to make that. Yeah, and for the doe things is I've said it before. On my main farm property, I don't see a lot of does every time I go out. If I start seeing what I think is 20 different does every sit, then I'm gonna feel like I got a doe problem. But I don't right now. I might go out and see 2-3 does a sit, and then I'll see a buck or 2 bucks. So it's okay, I'm in check a little bit here. Now I go to my other farm, my family farm. You sit in our hayfield, you'll see 60 to 70 does a night without a buck in the field.
Yeah.
So it's okay, we need to start doing some doe management here, and that's kind of how I dictated a little bit. And I want to say it was Dr. Grant Woods. I think I heard him say a couple years ago, if you have a family group of does comes out that's 5 or 6 does or something like that all together, then you probably have too many does. I can't remember if that was the number. I probably shouldn't have said that because I might be telling something wrong. But he did say something like that. It was 5 to 7 does in a group. That means you should probably shoot one of those does. That's what he was kind of getting at. So I don't know. It's just like you said, Chuck. It's one of those things that you're probably not going to be friends with your best friend after fighting. And this thing is, he's my buddy. He's one of my best friends, probably my best hunting buddy. And, we don't talk about it really much anymore. And he doesn't really give me shit about going to shoot does. And I really don't give him shit anymore about I kind of do. Because he goes out, the opening day, he went out and, before, it was a half hour after sunrise, he's already seen 45 does, different does. I'm like, dude, you need to start shooting those does, and I'll just jab at him a little bit. And they don't. But he doesn't. But some family members go up there and shoot a couple does, but they can stand to take probably 15 does a year and probably wouldn't even see an effect, honestly.
I had a neighbor that called me one day and wanted to know if I go walk his property with him and give him some advice and whatnot. I said, yeah. I said, I'd love to. So anyway, I'd make a long story short. We walked all his property and we got back. We jumped 2 does on this entire walk. We got back to the truck and we were riding back to the house and we were talking about some food plot ideas and looking at aerial maps, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, how many does do you think I need to shoot next fall? And I said, I don't know. I said, probably not very many. And he said, what do you think? 10, 15, something like that? I said, yeah. I said, I don't know. It'd probably be too many. So I'm thinking we ought to shoot 10 to 15 at least. And this conversation went on for about 4 miles. And I finally looked at him and I said, how many damn deer did we see when we walked through there? He said, well, I think we jumped 2 does. I said, I wouldn't shoot more than 1 then. And he looked at me all dumbfounded. and I said, well, really? I mean, this was springtime. This was when deer would have been, if they lived in that area, no food source, if they lived in that area, then we're going to see every one of them. They're going to be grouped up and whatnot. Right. We saw 2, and he's talking about shooting 10 to 15. I said, I don't believe I would shoot 2. And I've got farms here. I'm a spoiled hunter. I grew up in, I've lived in the Midwest my whole life, lived on this farm my whole life. And some of these lease farms that I've got, I never used to get skunked. And I may go out and get skunked. I may see, 1 fawn. Most of the farms I grew up on was I didn't see the 60 deer, but you saw 15. There was movement all the time. And I've always been, that's why I'm not a good turkey hunter, because I can't sit down and not see anything or hear anything. I'm impatient. I got to get up and do something else. And, the farms that I grew up on, I never had to worry about that because, every deer that was, every leaf that cracked was actually a deer instead of a squirrel. And I thought about taking up squirrel hunting on a couple farms just because you hear the leaves crack and get your hopes up, and it's different. It's just so different for not even state to state, and not even county to county. It's just farm to farm. Where your buddy, you may be giving him a hard time for not shooting does when he should be. And then he may be giving you a hard time for not shooting does when you really don't need to be shooting does. So, like I said, politics, religion, women, and whitetails, all conversations that are going to end up, in a heated argument. So,
yep.
Well, that horse is beat to about as dead as we can get it. So let's move on. So the next thing, we're a little over an hour here talking, but I want to get into this. And I want to pick your brain. I've actually never talked to you about this question. And honestly, I haven't talked to you about it either, Justin. So I'm really interested to hear both your takes on it. But it's one of those things, a lot of people have trouble with it sometime in their career, and maybe they don't. But it's what a lot of people call the moment of truth. So as a bow hunter, when you've got that buck coming in or that doe or whatever it have be, that whatever it is, 5 to 10 seconds of your process. How do you deal with, what is your process? Do you have a process to get the job done? And, it's kind of a loaded question, but do you have a process that you go through to make everything happen and you get that deer on the ground?
Unfortunately, in my situation, yes, I do, because I don't have a guy like you sitting over my shoulder running the camera. So I've got a process of trying to produce a television show. So I've got the whole process of going through, making sure the camera's on him. It's in focus. This is good. This angle's running. That angle's running. But as far as a hunter in general, I can always tell you if my hunt was successful, I can always answer a question like that in this way. I'll never remember what happened. If I successfully harvest an animal, somebody said, what happened, when you pulled the trigger, or what pin were you using, or whatever. I won't remember looking down the peep sight. I won't remember, punching the trigger or pulling the trigger or whatever, because you just get in the zone. It's just, you black everything out, and I can't. I've missed deer before, and try to wonder why, but I can't answer the question because I couldn't tell you. Was I looking down the peep, or was I looking around the string? Did I not follow through because I was worried about where the arrow was going to go? It's the hunts that are always successful for me. Well, and I shouldn't say the successful ones. Every hunt's the same for me because I get into that, into that zone. And the guys on the TV show have always dubbed me the killer. I've always had, this is probably going to be the first year I don't know, since 2006 that I don't harvest a buck with my bow. But they've always dubbed me the killer. And it's just the simple fact that I can go out and get it done. And when the moment of truth, as you say, arrives, I'm usually fairly stone cold. Now, I will say that since I've done pretty much all self-filming for the last several years, at one time I was considered probably, if not number one, number two shot on the show, but trying to run a camera and shoot a bow, some of my shot qualities went to hell. But to say what motions I go through, like I said, it's I don't typically get the buck fever and the shakes and all that. When it's over with, I'm shaking like a dog crap in a chain, thinking that every link's going to be the hook, But at that time, it's just like you said, it's the moment of truth. You just that's what you're there to do. That's what you practiced all summer to do, and so I guess to answer your question, I can't tell you anything special. I do.
I think in my opinion, it goes back to something you mentioned earlier that, you're either born with it or you're not. And in that moment, you're the predator. And to break it down in simple terms, that's really what it is. That deer's prey and you're the predator. And all the practice you do and everything else is preparation for that moment. And the fact that you don't remember what happens, that just reinforces the fact that there is a certain amount of instinct involved in hunting, no matter if the predator is a human or a wolf or a coyote. You know what I mean? It's just something that you either have in you or you don't. And if you don't, it's not a bad thing. But and I have this conversation with myself all the time because, and you guys can probably even relate to this yourselves, that there's times where I've been just a cameraman on a hunt, and once it's all over and that reaction is over, and I'm like, oh crap, did I push record? And it's like, and you did because it's just, that's what you're supposed to be doing in that moment. Like, that's your job right then. And then you turn it back over to review the footage, and you're like, yeah, of course I did. It's there.
I think it was season 1 of our show that you edited, Aaron. There was a hunt where Steve Philly kills a 160-inch deer, and somebody asked me what all the background noise was. We had like 3 or 4 different GoPros going, and then the main camera. Well, my stand was just a little bit loose, and I was shaking so damn bad the stand was rattling, and every microphone was picking it up, and all I was the camera guy. I was just the cameraman, and I'll admit that we started this television journey back in, I think, 2009 is when we started. So you 10 years this year. It's probably not as fun for me as it once was. It's not my occupation, like it is yours, Aaron, or even yours, Justin. But it's probably not as fun for me as it used to be. But the hunting is still as fun today as it was the day when that little kid shot that forkhorn, that open sight 30-30. And if it ever gets, if I get to the point I don't want to drag camera equipment up and down trees and go through the hour and a half of taking pictures and doing the hat dance and all that stuff, I can walk away from that and be fine with that. I pray that there never comes a day where the hunting becomes monotonous to me, because if it does, that's when I have to quit. But like I said, I still get as excited today. I mean, when I was filming the mid 150s I was telling you about, my knees were knocking together and I didn't even have my bow in my hand. So it's just like you said, you're the predator, and every time a coyote's ready to jump on a mouse or on a fawn or whatever, that its hearts are racing and its adrenaline's pumping, and we're no different. We're two-legged and are up a tree. So
yeah. And and my way of combating that is just trying to make that moment slow down in any way you can. If you do have issues with it, I did have 2 seasons I had an issue with it, probably about 8 years ago. And I tried to do a process of elimination. Was it because I wasn't practicing enough? Well, it wasn't that. Well, was it this? Was it with that? And honestly, what I come down to, and Chuck, I confided in you a little bit on this. It was the sights I was using. That's what I brought it to. And, I was using 7 pins and 5 pins when really I didn't need to. And I remember the day I called you and said, hey, I'm looking into getting a 1-pin adjustable sight. Tell me everything I need to know, because I know you're a diehard 1-pin guy. What do I need to get into to do this? And ever since that phone call, and I went and got a sight, a 1-pin adjustable, and I'm still using it to this day. And that single-handedly, I mean, it I don't know if that cured me, because I have not had an issue since then. I don't know if that's what it was. I don't know if I just needed something to hang my hat on. But I did try to slow that moment down a little bit too, kind of talking yourself through things as well. But, like you said, it is complete blackout mode. It doesn't matter if I'm filming or hunting, shooting a doe, shooting a buck. It does not matter. Like, it is, instincts, like Justin said, it just takes over and you're good to go. You just know. And that kind of goes back to, when you're practicing in the yard. And that's why I try to tell my wife too, and I tell myself, you don't need to go out and shoot 30 to 50 arrows a night. Go shoot 5 great arrows. don't make them 5 quality arrows, and because that doing that in the yard, that's going to become second nature. Those 5 quality arrows, you know what I mean, or 10, whatever it is. Don't make yourself tired to where you're picking up bad habits, and when you're in the heat of the moment, bad habits might take over. So that's, I guess, that's what I'm.
I don't shoot a lot this time of year, but I've got a 20-yard range in my basement, and then I've got a range outside. And every now and then, whether it's just in the basement, I've got a practice arrow down there. I'll knock it up and shoot one shot. And chances are, if that one shot on the range ain't worth the shit, that one shot I get in the field ain't gonna be worth one either. And there's no sense. I used to do that. I used to go out and I'd shoot 4 groups of 3 at 20, and then 4 at 30, and so on and so forth. And then I would start going to hell, and I'd say, okay, I'm going to shoot one more good group of 3 at 20, and then I'm done. Well, I get back up to 20, and now I'm wore out. I'm tipped off, and I can't shoot that one good group of 3. And you kind of have that sense of failure, but you come back out the next day and pick up the techniques and stuff, and boom, you're right back on target. I've got friends that'll shoot 100 arrows a night, and I'm like, I'm a strong guy, I'm short arm guy, shoot 70 pounds, but man, I don't have it in me to pull that thing 100 times. Just I don't have, like I said, 10 arrows, 10 arrows, like you said. What's the perfect practice makes perfection, or I can't remember exactly how that term goes, but yeah, trying to practice to be perfect is just gonna over a lot of arrows. It's just gonna make you, like you said, pick up bad habits. So
yeah, I think we've hit on everything I wanted to get accomplished here, and I don't want
and probably then some.
Yeah, that's fine though.
Yeah.
I mean, we had some great conversation going on there. That was good. We got off a little bit on. We did beat a horse to death, but I mean. not really. Just But anyway, I think it was a great conversation, and on the East Coast here, or on the East side, it is 10:30 at night right now. I know you guys are still. You probably got another hour until you go to bed. Well, Chuck, maybe now it might be past your bedtime.
It's getting there. I started doing this CrossFit stuff at 5:30 in the morning, so I got to drive 30 minutes to get there. So I get up about 4:15 and get around and that's I'm not a morning. I don't get a lot of morning hunts in because I don't like mornings.
Well, we're going to do another podcast coming up, and we're going to be talking about morning hunting because I know how you don't like it.
It's actually the most rewarding time of the year, or time of the day, but yeah, so I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed listening to your podcast, and appreciate the opportunity to to be the voice of, or the voiceover. That's been fun, so I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I appreciate you doing it and coming on, and like I said, we'll have you on here again soon. So.
Sounds good. Justin, good visiting with you as well.
Yeah, likewise, Chuck. Maybe we'll cross paths one day. I don't think I'm too far away from you.
Now, if you're in Des Moines, you're about a little over 2 hours, so
yeah.
There's probably a beer joint between here and there that we could set up. We could talk some politics, religion, women, and whitetails, and whatnot. So
well, if I pull my Iowa tag for next year, I'm coming out there. So maybe we'll just have to all 3 of us meet up and do that.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds good to me.
Guys, Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Chuck. And there you have it. Episode number 31 is in the books. I can't thank Chuck enough for coming on and doing this, and also being the VO talent of the podcast, or the voice of it, basically. And I'm sorry for the audio issues. Chuck was having some issues on his end, but it did pan itself out there after he gets talking a little bit. But a lot of cool information on here. Hope everybody has something to take from it. And I do want to remind you again, please go on and leave a rating and subscribe to the podcast. Go on to the YouTube channel, the Fall Podcast YouTube channel. Subscribe there because you can listen to the episodes there as well if you don't want to download them on your phone. Podbean app and iTunes and CastBox are just a few places you can go and download them. Google Play as well. So if you have an Android or an iPhone or whatever phone you might have, go there and download it. And again, thanks a lot for listening, and thank you for all the support.